I decided to make another Ghibli project. I love Kiki's delivery service. Especially as an artist who experiences frequent burnout, a lot of the scenes really resonated with me. I had to make something for that movie next. So I kinda went a little crazy with this sculpture. There were so many elements I had to make, and I had to be so precise with the counter. You know what, I'll just show you what I mean. Let's get to the sketch. The idea I wanted to make takes place in the bakery. I really love bread, so this was just an excuse for me to sculpt lots of bread. I'll probably complain about this later, having to make so much bread, but it's worth it. I drew the counter display and filled it with many different baked goods, stuff that I think would be fun to sculpt. Kiki is dozing off on top of the counter. Yes, she's standing and napping. I know it's possible. I've done it before. It's probably not a busy day, so she can rest her eyes a bit. At first, I wanted to have a vase of flowers and a jar of jam on top of the counter, but then I realized something I could add instead that's much better, and that's Gigi. I can't believe I almost forgot about Gigi. I colored and added some warm lighting to the piece. And lastly, I added a broom because I felt like it completed the entire scene. I just needed something witchy. It looks cute enough.
Sculpting!
I'm going to get the hard part over with first. The dreaded counter. I went over a couple options, but the only one that made the most sense was to actually cut out the pieces and glue them together. Actually build the counter. So now you all get to watch me cut out a bunch of flat pieces. You're gonna hate me for this, but I actually didn't measure anything. I kinda just eyeballed it all. I mean, I overlapped pieces and cut them to get the right size, but no measurements were made. So we'll see how that goes for me. I honestly make it sound like I have a vendetta against pulling out a ruler. And maybe I do. Maybe I don't like being restricted by numbers. Maybe I'm just bad with rulers. I'm sorry, you guys come here to watch art be made and instead just get me complaining. It will happen again. I finished cutting all the pieces and baked them in the oven. Here they all are. I also sanded them a bit. Now I stick the pieces together using some goop. It's just liquid Sculpey that I mix with clay to make a paste. So far, so good. Well, not measuring led me to have a slight gap here because it doesn't perfectly fit on, but nothing a lot of goop can't fix. And the final piece, which I covered with so much goop to fill in its gaps. There wasn't as many issues as I thought there'd be. I can't believe I made myself a little clay counter display.
Next.
I clayed up the bottom of the broom first and sectioned them off into 3 parts. To make the illusion of bristles, I used my tool to make indents all around the ends. I then tied off the sections with a long, thin string of clay. I added clay to the broom stick, and done.
Next.
Now we gotta fill up that counter with lots of bread and sweet treats. Starting with a fat baguette. It's just an oval shape with slits. I made 4 of each. Next are croissants. I made crescent shapes and then added the details on top. I also made some plain donuts. Nothing too fancy. We then got little apple pies. They are more rectangular shaped, and I also added slits to those as well. I then sculpted some regular loaves of bread with puffy tops. I guess they also look like huge muffins. It can be either. Lastly, I made cream-filled horn pastries. Those are real good.
Next.
Moving on to Kiki, I smooth clay onto her dress. I know the wire piece for her legs look weird. They'll be cut into two separate pieces in a bit. Now I add clay to those pieces of wire and shape them into looking more like legs. It took quite a while, but I got them looking the way I liked. I sculpt and pop on her sleeves next, then make her forearms and hands. I glue everything on and position the arms across each other to be as comfortable as possible for her head. The counter helped a lot in getting the position right. Onto her head, I added clay to my ball of foil. I think I might have made the head a little too big now looking back at it. I sculpted a few tufts of hair for her bangs and stuck them on. Now I just randomly add clay all around the side and back of her head as a base before I shape her entire head of hair. It took very long to get the look right. Final tiny strand of hair to add. Now I can work on her big red bow. I make two heart-like shapes and add a crease to the center of them. I rolled out and flattened a long strand to glue on top of her head. Then I can stick on the bow. I almost forgot to sculpt her ear, so I did that. Finally connecting her head to her body to see if it looks right. And I'm really happy with it. She looks very comfy.
Next.
The final piece that needs to be sculpted is Gigi. I made a bowling pin shape as the base and then added his small muzzle and big ears. He only gets two small little front legs and a tail here. No back legs. I think he looks fine without them. And he's done. Now all of these pieces can go into the oven and get primed.
Paint time!
I mixed a buttload of brown to paint this counter. It required so many layers. I also had to double check so many little corners to make sure I got paint into them. Once I got the whole thing coated in brown, I started going in with a lighter brown to make it more wood-like. Then I went in with a warmer brown for the light source shining down onto the counter. kept layering on a brighter and brighter yellow until I liked the look. Honestly, it came out looking more like the wood got super worn out. But overall, I liked it.
Next.
I painted dark brown onto the handle of the broom and painted the head of the broom a light brownish yellow. Lastly, the ropes tied around the bristles were a light brown. I added a little highlight and then we're done.
Next.
The breads are just more different shades of brown. The baguettes were painted a warmer brown. I added some highlights and painted a cream color where the bread slits would be. For the croissants, I painted it the same warm brown as the baguettes. But also blended in a light brown at the bottom of the croissants for more detail. I also added highlights too. The donuts were just a darker brown. I didn't add too much detail to them. They were just a couple coats and done. The mini apple pie pastries are painted with a more golden brown. I brushed on a warm orangish shade on top to add an egg wash look, and then painted in a darker orange into the slits. The loaves of bread are painted the darkest brown. I imagine them to be like a rye bread loaf. I added mini highlights and finished. Finally, I paint the horn pastries. I painted in a light brown, which I also shade on top. I painted highlights and the cream. I initially drew the cream as a white custard filling, but then I changed my mind and decided to make it chocolate instead. I liked how the chocolate looked more.
Next.
Again, don't be alarmed. I popped off her head for an easier paint job. This time, it won't look like a crime scene, I promise. Kiki is painted with a dark indigo, red, dark brown, and a pale peach. I started with her dress first. The color I mixed started looking real light, but after a couple layers, it got darker and looked how I wanted it to be. I painted her arms and legs next. And then I painted in her little red slippers. Moving on to the head. I started painting her hair with the dark brown. I added tiny lighter brown highlights. Then I can start on her bow. The bow was super fun to paint. I just had to be very careful with the crevices next to the hair I already painted. I painted in her face. My sketch doesn't have her mouth being shown, but with how I sculpted it, more of her face was visible, so I felt like adding a mouth was necessary. The mouth also made her look super cute, so I didn't mind. I painted in her eyes and little eyelashes. And randomly decided to add a swirl in her ears. That was such a random last-minute decision. Now I can glue the head back in place. And she's done. Little standing up sleepy Kiki.
Next.
Gigi is painted black and white. Gigi has eyes that had to be shaped in a very particular way, and I tried my best. I went over it a couple times because I made some mistakes, but I hope they look alright. But he's done.
Next.
The base is very plain. I mixed a light brown and coated the entire thing. I then layered on brighter browns in a few areas. It took a lot of blending. Here's the base. Now I can put everything together. I'll take the time to properly put the breads into the counter, but for now, I'm just gonna scatter them around. It looks like Kiki was too busy napping that she didn't notice someone ransacking the bakery. Imagine if I just left it like this.
Success! Whoopee!
I feel so dumb. I didn't realize that Gigi actually has a pink nose, and I forgot to paint the insides of his ears purple, so I quickly fixed that in the end. So I switched the placement of the donuts and the baguettes because I was having issues fitting in the croissants and the baguettes into the lower shelf. Those were too big. The donuts were a better fit down there. I may have done a crap job at blending in the light source, so whoops. Everything else looks surprisingly good. The counter may not be perfect, but I'm just happy I was able to make a counter at all. I love my bread so much, even though some of them are in the back and can't be seen. It's such a warm and cozy vibe. I'm very proud of this one. Thank you all so much for watching. My second Ghibli sculpture is done. I have some ideas for another one, but we'll see when that'll be. I'll have to build up a little more confidence before I tackle those ones. Let me know what you think in the comments. Stay tuned for the next few videos. I have some Christmassy plans.
Bye-bye!